Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, June 4th. You're listening to the Mo News podcast. I'm mo.news.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, I'm here to inform you that it is National Cheese Day today.
AKA every day in my house.
Do they need a specific holiday for many people? My wife, Alex, is one of those who, no matter what, like now I'm already trained at a restaurant, extra parm. Yes. There's never enough Parmesan.
So we will order in family style from a restaurant around here called La Parma, and there's a couple of them. And one time they forgot to include the Parmesan cheese, and it was like meal ruined for me, my sister-in-law. It was like heartbreaking because it's such a make or break thing, the Parmesan cheese. Like you just need it for certain food, at least if you're a cheese person like I am.
So treat yourself today, everybody. Treat yourself today, everybody. We have to thank the good folks here in Chicago as I record this, the good folks just across the border in Wisconsin who officially created National Cheese Day because obviously Wisconsin. So thank you to all of you in Wisconsin and across the country for giving us the cheese. And again, treat yourself with that extra parm today because it's National Cheese Day.
Okay, let's get to some headlines. President Biden plans to issue his most aggressive executive order on the southern border, limiting asylum. What exactly that will mean? Paging Dr. Fauci, congressional Republicans bring the former official back to Capitol Hill 2 years after he retired to answer more questions about the pandemic response. Record heat expected across the American West today as we're getting new estimates on how much it may cost to cool your home this summer. The mayor of Atlanta declares a state of emergency following water main breaks. A major announcement on a new shoulder gel that will essentially allow men to shoulder the responsibility of birth control.
Literally and figuratively, Jill. We'll explain the breakthrough.
There's a lot of shoulders involved. Some new numbers on all of you, or us, who admit that we are taking naps during the workday. And are Americans over live concerts or is something else going on? We're going to talk about the concert tours that are being canceled this summer. And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, we'll be doing a little Bruce Springsteen history for you today. Get excited.
All right, I'm here for it. All right, let's start with a major immigration announcement expected today. The White House is telling lawmakers that the president is preparing to sign off on an executive order today that would significantly shut down asylum requests at the U.S.-Mexico border. So this order would ban migrants who cross the border illegally from claiming asylum, allowing them to be quickly deported back to Mexico or to their home countries. The order aims to restrict the flow of migrants over the border as illegal immigration becomes a big priority for voters ahead of the November elections. Polls show a majority of Americans have been expressing dissatisfaction with Biden's handling of the issue so far. This new proposal also reportedly creates a new daily limit of 2,500 asylum requests. Once the number of daily encounters hits 2,500 between ports of entry, the border will be shut down. And this does mark Biden's most aggressive unilateral move yet to control the numbers at the border. The White House is hosting mayors of border towns at an event today where he is expected to speak at length about the proposals. There are reports that the 2,500 number is still being negotiated. Other border activity, like trade, is expected to continue. The decision comes after months of debate inside of the administration, in large part on the legality of such an order. Former President Trump sought to enact a nearly identical ban in 2018, but it was blocked by a federal court that said it was a violation of asylum laws, which let people ask for humanitarian protection no matter how they enter the country.
Yeah, remember, there's international laws when it comes to asylum. If you say you can't go back to your home country, we're obligated to let you in, no limits. So it'll be interesting here how Biden and the White House configure this executive order differently than what Trump did, because without any meaningful differences, it would almost certainly be found illegal, just like Trump's. Now, if this seems familiar, limits on asylum and the other provisions Jill just laid out. That's because that was part of a key provision in that Senate bipartisan plan we told you back in the fall. It came out of the Senate. Democrats and Republicans put together a plan, billions of dollars, that would effectively shut down the border and expel migrants over a certain number. Now, we should remember this was a key compromise here. This would have been the most aggressive plan from Democrats that we've seen in modern history. But there were a group of Republicans for which this was still not enough. That included former President Trump, who advised them, don't do anything. I like the immigration issue. I want to run on it. Don't give Biden the win on this. Well, now what is the White House doing 6 months later? They're going to try to do this as an executive order. They're going to try to do this independently, which, by the way, we should note, Republicans did tell the White House, you should do this on your own. Why do you need legislation? So we're going to wait and see the details later today. People familiar with this new executive order said the ban will be contingent upon a similar daily trigger as the Senate bill. So again, using that Senate bill that didn't go through as the template here for this plan. They believe they have a legal justification under what's called the Immigration and Nationality Act that says a president can suspend the entry of foreigners if he finds the entry of a certain group of what they call aliens, that's the legal term here, would be detrimental to the country. That's the same section, by the way, notably, that Trump used to ban citizens of Muslim-majority countries back when he took office. So it's just interesting here, Jill, to watch the evolution. Democrats, Biden, were very critical of Trump on this. Now, effectively, they're using some of the same rationale, same provisions here. It comes as we saw record numbers last year of people crossing the border. Now, interestingly, they're going to do this on their own, because they're seeing the politics of all of this. There was a Wall Street Journal poll that came out recently that found that 2/3 of Americans were disapproved of Biden on border security. 70% said developments in immigration and border security are headed in the wrong direction. So the White House knows it has to do something here. But the bottom line is this. Can it actually be implemented? Because remember, on Capitol Hill, they were going to pass this and give money for immigration enforcement. We don't have enough people on the border. And that's a concern here, is that even if Biden wants to push this forward, which, by the way, it could go into effect immediately, there isn't enough personnel on the border to actually conduct all of this. So in many cases, once they hit this number, they're going to end up not deporting people, but releasing them within the country because we don't have enough people to actually conduct the deportations. And that's where the funding comes in here. Either way, clearly at the White House, they feel they got to do something. And so we'll watch this Biden event today and then see the impact it has on the numbers and on the politics.
Moshe, I mentioned yesterday that last week I hit the streets of Long Island talking to voters about what they thought about the Trump verdict. And I also asked them what issues they actually care about. Everyone said inflation and immigration. So two issues that we talk about a lot here on the podcast, but immigration, yes, it certainly has become a big issue this election season. So not a huge surprise that Biden is trying to do something. And
it's not just the border. It's a lot of swing districts like yours.
Exactly, because this migration issue really has extended to states, into blue states in the north and to suburbs that are now housing migrants or trying to figure out how to house migrants and educate migrants and provide medical care. And if you do that, what gets cut from the budget?
Right.
All right. Also, sticking with politics, Dr. Anthony Fauci was back in the hot seat on Capitol Hill Monday. The former director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases testified at a House subcommittee hearing about the United States COVID-19 pandemic response and the origins of the virus. The hearing was Fauci's first public testimony on Capitol Hill since his retirement from government back in 2022. And it turned contentious at times as Republicans grilled Fauci over a wide range of topics, including the basis for public health recommendations during the pandemic and email use by public health officials. At times, they didn't even want him to actually answer their questions, as happens most at these hearings on both sides of the aisle. But here is Marjorie Taylor Greene, who refused to even call him a doctor and basically just wanted to yell at him.
You think that's appropriate? Do the American people deserve to be abused like that, Mr. Fauci? Because you're not doctor, you're Mr. Fauci in my few minutes. No, I don't need your answer. I want to talk about this right here.
Mr. Chairman,
Fauci,
objection.
I reclaim my time.
Objection.
I reclaim my time.
Okay, so by the way, that was Congressman Jamie Raskin pushing back on Greene. And if you are actually watching the clip, you'll see that Dr. Fauci's mouth is moving, like he's trying to answer the questions, but they cut his mic.
Yeah, no, she just wanted to yell at him. Jill, this is people's frustration with Congress, which is like, okay, you want accountability, but like some of you just don't want accountability. You just want to make sound bites to re-air on cable news. And by the way, mission accomplished, Marjorie. Look, we just played your clip.
So my first question that I was going to ask was like, who came up with that one? Like, you're not a doctor. And we're going to go with Mr. Fauci. And then the second was like, and who thought it was going to work? And I'm thinking, as you said, like, I guess hook, line, and sinker, because it's the soundbite we picked for this podcast.
I talked about this on the Instagram account recently, Jill. I'm like, I don't want to give these people attention, but at the same time, like, people need to know that this is what's going on in Congress. And when you elect certain people that are more about the media and sound bites, you're not really accomplishing much. So there you go.
Okay, so last week, the committee released transcripts from a closed-door interview conducted with Fauci back in January. The interview lasted 14 hours over the course of 2 days. Republican committee staff concluded in a memo of key takeaways that the lab leak theory about where the virus originated is not a conspiracy theory, pointing to comments from Fauci during the interview that it could be a lab leak or it could be a natural occurrence. Although Fauci did note that he believes the evidence is that it is more likely a natural occurrence. The memo also claimed that certain pandemic policies lacked supporting scientific evidence, like the guidance to maintain a 6-foot distance from others, vaccine mandates, and masks for children.
Yeah, so Republicans here are looking back at things 4 years later and trying to seek some accountability, some effectively, some just trying to score political points. But ultimately, what did we learn about all of it? What was actually happening behind the scenes? And there's some admissions for things like the 6-foot thing, like staying 6 feet apart, turned out to be a suggestion from the CDC that had no real basis in science. And so Republicans, especially Republican constituents, are still very upset about that stuff. And that's why they're bringing Fauci back out of retirement to grill him on it. And so coming out of that transcript, you saw some Republicans trying to essentially get him on the record, get him on camera to talk about that. Here's a bit of an exchange with Fauci yesterday on that front.
Over the course of the pandemic, and ask you to give me a yes or no as to whether you believe these measures were justified. Business closures?
Early on, when 5,000 people were dying a day, yes.
Church closures?
Same thing.
School closures?
Again, the
stay-at-home orders?
These were important when we were trying to stop the tsunami of deaths that were occurring early on. How long you kept them going is debatable.
Mask mandates for adults, mask mandates for children, mask mandates for children under 5?
And going back to what I said before, all of that is in the context of, at the time, 4,000 to 5,000
mask mandates for children under 5, there's scientific evidence for that?
Excuse me?
Mask mandates for children under 5, there's scientific evidence supporting that?
There was no study that did masks on kids before. You couldn't do the study. You had to respond to an epidemic that was killing 4,000 to 5,000 Americans per day.
That was Congressman Michael Cloud, a Republican from Texas, by the way, who was grilling Fauci there. One other thing Fauci brought up, and he got sort of emotional yesterday about this, Jill, was the death threats that he and his family are experiencing in the wake of the pandemic. He has full-time security now, given the amount of death threats that he receives. And so that was a moment, and Democrats were making a point of just what he has given up and the life he now needs to lead, given all the attacks on him on a daily basis. You saw some Democrats coming to his defense. You mentioned Jamie Raskin earlier. Here's a bit of that Democratic Congressman, Jamie Raskin, speaking to Fauci yesterday.
Some of our colleagues in the United States House of Representatives seem to want to drag your name through the mud. They're treating you, Dr. Fauci, like a convicted felon. Actually, you probably wish they were treating you like a convicted felon. They treat convicted felons with love and admiration. Some of them blindly worship convicted felons.
Clearly a reference from Raskin there, Jill, to Donald Trump, the convicted felon thing, the worshiping of convicted felon, trying to make a point there. Though in all seriousness, all this showboating aside, back and forth aside, there are some real questions still to be asked about our pandemic response to get ready for the next one. This is something that we've discussed on this pod before. It was actually the subject of a special interview pod I did, Jill, that's out today, episode 89, looking back at the pandemic. The book is called The Big Fail. Bethany McLean was one of the authors there, who looked back at basically everything that Republicans and Democrats got wrong when it came to COVID response. So take a listen to that podcast if you're looking to dive deep into that. That's been on premium for a bit. We're releasing it today on the Mo News interview pod. But there are some real questions still to be asked about Fauci's communications and the communications around the administration, what was done via private personal email versus public FOIA-able email, meaning we have laws in this country that allow us to access all government emails, and it appears some business was done via private email. So Republicans are asking questions about that. So there are some real questions there about, again, how they were communicating and to the extent that it took some stuff offline, so to speak. This, by the way, was an issue that was brought up with Hillary Clinton back in the day and Colin Powell. So Republicans and Democrats alike, it happened during the Trump administration as well, where folks use their personal email accounts, their Gmails, so eventually Congress and the public can't see what they were doing. So Republicans are frustrated on that. So expect to hear more on this front. This still is a very potent issue. People are still upset about what went down 4 years ago and want to get to the bottom of it. At the same time, some of the lines of questioning less effective than others these days.
This is one of the issues that it is really a shame that it has become so politicized, because the one thing that almost every expert can agree on is that there is going to be another pandemic. And the fact that we're just kind of not learning from it, and we're doing these jabs like Mr. Fauci, blah, blah, blah. And I get that they're trying to learn a little bit about what happened. If there is one issue that should rise above politics, it's health and the possibility of another pandemic.
Yeah, and some people have said, and this is again the discussion that we did in the special interview pod over on the Mo News interview podcast, that we after 9/11 we looked at things, right? What did we get wrong in the lead up to 9/11? What do we have to change out of that? And we created the Office of Director of National Intelligence. We revamped how we handle terrorism and communication on the national security side. And the thought is, if we still had somewhat normal politics, we would do the same post-pandemic. Okay, guys, let's look back at what we did. What did we get wrong? How do we need to bolster and reframe the FDA and the CDC and everything else? Like, we had Operation Warp Speed on the vaccine. Check on that. Lockdowns and educational, keeping kids outside school way too long. Okay, X on that. But the problem is that everything is so partisan now that we can't get together and agree on some basic things when it comes to public health. And that concerns some folks as they look ahead to the fact that, yes, inevitably, there will be another pandemic one day.
Time for the speed read from Fox Weather. Triple-digit heat already on the way this week for much of the West, and it is coming weeks earlier than normal. By Wednesday and Thursday, temperatures in Phoenix and Las Vegas could approach or exceed 110 degrees. While Death Valley in California could see a high temperature of 118 degrees or higher. If Vegas reaches at least 110 degrees on Wednesday, it would set a new record for the earliest 110-degree day on record in the city. The current record is June 6th. That was set back in 2010. Sacramento, California will also likely get above 100 degrees starting today. These temperatures constitute readings that will be about 10 to 20 degrees above average for much of inland California and the desert Southwest.
Yeah, so people are used to this in August, sometimes July, but early June is new for folks. And it could be the beginning of what could be 12 weeks plus, Jill, of triple-digit heat for much of the region. And it comes as we got some new numbers yesterday about how much Americans should be ready to pay to cool their homes this summer. It is more than ever. The average cost of keeping an American home cool from June to September is set to hit $719, which is 8% higher than last year. This is according to new projections that we got from advocates for low-income households this week. Now, the fact that it'll take that much money, above $700 to cool your house this summer, that's going to be the highest level in a decade, and it's a steep jump from $573 that it cost back in 2021. So it's up almost $150 over the last couple of years. Now, this does vary geographically. It's as low as $580 to cool your home in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, but then much higher, almost $300 higher in the 800s to cool your home in places like Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. But as we see record heat in some of these other regions, those numbers are set to go up. And it does concern some folks, especially who are trying to help out low-income Americans. Organizations, the government funds a program called the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program. Funding for that has fallen by $2 billion in the last couple of years. So that means that, unfortunately, they'll be able to only help 1 million fewer people this year. They were hoping Congress would fully fund it. They have not. And so we've been telling you we're in for a hot one, and it appears it is starting early.
From CNN, Atlanta remains under a state of emergency as it battles disruptions to its water service that started last week, leaving a big part of this major city under boil water advisories and highlighting the pervasiveness of problems caused by America's aging infrastructure. The mayor, Andre Dickens, telling CNN, to the people of Atlanta, I do want to apologize that this has frustrated you and frustrated me this weekend. This was 3 days after the first of a string of water main breaks was reported. The city has been plagued by water problems since Friday, when the first two of a series of water main breaks emerged along two pipes. One, a 36-inch pipe, the other, a 48-inch pipe that Dickens said were about a century old.
Yeah, so one of the pipes we're talking about here was installed back in 1910, another one from 1930. This is an issue, Jill, across the country. Atlanta's troubles really indicative of a broader issue of decaying infrastructure in this country. In the U.S. and Canada, the latest estimate is that there are 260,000 water main breaks a year, costing us $2.6 billion. The average age of failing water mains is 53 years old, and about a third of water mains in the U.S. and Canada are over the age of 50. Right now in Atlanta, unfortunately for them, no timeline when everything will be back up and running. The mayor saying that they're going to just have to boil water right now, and we'll let you know when everything is ready to go again.
All right, men, get your shoulders ready. From the New York Post, men may soon be able to shoulder the responsibility of birth control, literally. A hormonal birth control gel, which is rubbed on each shoulder blade once daily, shows promising results in a new trial. On Sunday, researchers with the National Institutes of Health presented encouraging phase 2 trial results on the hormonal gel. The trial involved 222 men, ages 18 to 50. They applied 5 milliliters of the gel, that's about a teaspoon, to each of their shoulder blades once per day. The second part of the 2-part trial is still underway, but initial findings showed that the contraceptive worked faster than expected. After 12 weeks of applying the gel every day, 86% of trial participants achieved sperm suppression.
Yeah, we won't go into detail here on how many millions of sperm is sperm suppression. Needless to say, it appears based on this study that they've achieved the right number, and they're really excited about it. On average, the timing for contraception was about 8 weeks. 8 weeks of daily application of this shoulder gel. And this is a big deal because they've had trouble for years. You ladies have been shouldering the responsibility of birth control going back to the 1950s now. This is a synthetic hormone called nesterone, and it's actually an ingredient of the birth control ring that is used by women. Researchers think that the use of nesterone here makes the new gel work quickly and requires less testosterone. And it's also meant to keep men from producing sperm without impacting their sex drive or causing other side effects. So they've been trying to figure out this sweet spot, so to speak. Past trials have taken 9 to 15 weeks to be seeing results. And so they have high hopes here that this rapid time makes it more applicable to people, though it's still 2 months of rubbing the shoulder gel before they really see effectiveness. Now they got to study the effects of the gel on pregnancy because they were just studying the sperm count. Because of this, now the participants in the trial are required to be in a committed monogamous relationship and have consent from their female partners. And apparently the participants here in the trial, Jill, have all promised to have sex at least once a month for a year to continue this trial and see if this is really effective.
Do we know why the shoulders? serious question.
I mean, I could joke because we generally we're looking for a massage, and so it's like I'd like my birth control. Like I don't want to have to just take the birth control. I'd like a massage as part of my birth control.
Like the women have to apply the birth control on the men.
You have to take the pill every
with
day,
a
and we're just
massage.
can you just massage my shoulders with this gel?
Moshe, I guess it's better than the bottom of your feet, right? That would be like the other part that somebody would want a massage on.
I would like my birth control applied to my feet and my shoulders, and I have a little bit of pain in my lower back. Can I get it there too?
All right, from Newsday, about a third of workers say that they nap during work hours at least once a week. This is according to a recent survey of full-time employees. The survey was conducted by Sleep Doctor. That is a wellness company that tests sleep-related products. And it found that 33% of the 1,250 workers it polled said that they slept at least once a week while on the job. In total, nearly half of the workers surveyed, 46%, say that they have napped on the job at least a few times a year. Unsurprisingly, remote and hybrid workers were more likely to nap during work hours than in-person workers. I would hope so.
Shocker. Though, Jill, remember with like Google and some of those tech companies about a decade ago, they started opening nap rooms in some offices.
That is true. On a weekly basis, 34% of remote workers take naps compared to 45% of hybrid workers and 27% of in-person workers.
So that's still pretty good, right? That's still pretty good. 1 out of 4 in-person workers is admitting to taking a nap at work.
And one sleep coach says remote work, napping, and stress during the pandemic, these sorts of themes have been around for a few years since the work paradigm shifted in favor of more remote options. We are going to be blaming everything on the pandemic for like the next 100 years.
Wait a second. You just quoted a sleep coach. I would like a sleep coach. I feel like I have a lot of sleep-related things to work on.
It's called sleeping pills, Moshe. That's my answer.
But you just quoted a sleeping coach. I think that's such an interesting job. I think we need to have like a sleep coach on the podcast because first of all, how does one get to become a sleep coach? Like, I think I'm great at sleep. Like, I can coach other people on sleep.
I know families that use sleep coaches for their kids, not just toddlers, but even a lot of like 8, 9, 10-year-olds that have trouble sleeping or falling asleep without their parents in the room. They've used sleep coaches and rave about them, actually.
All right. So making the case here for these naps at work, experts say that napping, if limited to under 30 minutes, can be restorative and even aid productivity in the long run, especially if an employee might be dealing with sleep scheduling issues, other stressors. You know, we all know as parents, et cetera, that the kids have their own agenda when it comes to sleep. And so it might behoove employers to, allow these naps once in a while, potentially. Again, depending on the job and what you're doing on the job. But I think many of us have felt those late afternoons where you don't feel very productive, you feel exhausted. The argument is if a nap took place post-lunch or early afternoon, you could be more productive in those hours. So when they talked to these respondents, they said that for the most part, their naps are between 15 and 29 minutes. Jill, back to this Newsday story. Human resource executives who they spoke to out on Long Island said that while employee productivity was top of mind, a worker dozing on the clock was more a cause for concern than immediate punitive action. So you ain't going to be punished. We're more worried about you, why you feel the need to nap during the day. But I think we're all still trying to find this balance of hybrid work, napping. I feel like, Jill, this is less of an issue in Europe where they have a much more specific work schedule. And frankly, as I think about it now, there are parts of Southern Europe, the Spains, the Italys, and Greeces of the world, where literally they've built into their schedules siestas, right? They go home, they go eat lunch, they take a nap, they come back to work. It's why if you do midday shopping in some places in Europe, the shop is closed till they come back from their nap.
Sorry, sleeping.
I'll be back at 4 o'clock.
It does sound absolutely wonderful and like we are just doing it wrong here.
Jill, it's okay to admit you're one of those daily nappers somewhere around 2 o'clock.
I am a midday showerer, as we've discussed. And I am, a midday napper as well. Whatever. Why do you think I'm not coming into the office?
Put the ringer on silent. I'd let you sleep in the office. We got it. We got a couch.
So that's what she does all day. All right, finally from Morning Brew, do Americans have concert fatigue? More and more musicians are saying the show must go on does not apply to them. Jennifer Lopez, Bad Bunny, and the Black Keys are among the major musical artists who have canceled summer concert dates, or in J-Lo's case, an entire tour. On Friday, J-Lo shut down her This Is Me live tour of North America. It was slated for this summer. She says she wants to spend more time with her family. Rumors have been running rampant, though, of some marital issues with her husband, Ben Affleck. But also, her shows had been struggling to sell tickets as far back as March. And that has been a theme this summer. As soon as she announced that she was canceling her tour, there were tons of screenshots of mostly unbought seats at venues on ticket sales websites that have gone viral. And then there's the Black Keys, which last week decided to cancel a show that they had scheduled for November in Minneapolis. And apparently the Target Center, where that show was supposed to be, has been flaked on by 4 different shows this year.
Yeah, it looks like the Black Keys are going to some smaller venues as others cancel their shows entirely. So the big question is, what's going on? And there's a couple of things to look at here. One, there may be too many sort of mid-level acts attempting to tour at the same time, creating an oversupply of shows. Then there's the demand side. Remember, as we go back to talk about this all the time, the pandemic. After the pandemic, we all wanted experiences. So we saw this incredible demand for concerts. So the belief is that we're basically just going back to normal here, back to pre-pandemic times. And so once you saw this explosive live music growth, they tried to respond to this with all these shows. We were into that for a while. And now, especially as tickets are super expensive, and we've gotten our fill of concerts again post-pandemic, we just don't have the demand for those shows anymore. So these tours are struggling, and you're seeing these cancellations or these venue downgrades. But it, by the way, doesn't impact everybody. Olivia Rodrigo, Morgan Wallen have had no issue selling out shows. Also, Hootie and the Blowfish and Dave Matthews Band are all systems go for their summer tours. Of course, they've been traveling for a long time, so they have a committed audience there. So it really depends here on the specific artists, the albums that they have out, the timing, and just getting back to the fact that we're not going to see excessive demand like we saw the past couple of years, that things are starting to come back to normal.
So one of the takeaways from that story is that Hootie and the Blowfish is a go for this summer, but J-Lo is not. Okay, got it.
Just making sure you know, there are certain acts that really popped up in the 90s that are still going strong, and some that are taking the summer off. All right, now time for On This Day in History. On this June 4th, we begin in 1896. Henry Ford test drove the quadricycle. It was essentially a frame fitted with 4 bicycle wheels. A later version would put an engine on it, and a couple more additions after that, and you had the first car. On this day in 1919, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution granting women the right to vote is passed by Congress. It is sent to the states for ratification. Jill, as we've been covering the first woman elected president of Mexico, one thing I learned, one of the things that makes her election, and the fact that the election was between 2 women in Mexico, all the more remarkable, is that women in Mexico actually didn't have the right to vote till 1953, almost 40 years after they got the right to vote here. All right, on this day in World War II history, following a massive rescue effort that included civilian boats, you might have seen the film Dunkirk. Today marks the withdrawal of the Allied troops from Dunkirk, France. It was completed on this day. More than 300,000 soldiers were saved. Jill, one thing we'll be covering this week is the D-Day anniversary. Later this week, it'll be 80 years since the D-Day invasion by the Allies. And there was some remarkable video we posted on our Instagram account over the weekend, on the mo.news Instagram account, of 60 veterans, ages 96 to 107, American veterans that have made their way to France. Many of them have never been back since World War II. And this is seen as probably one of the last times that we'll see a large group of American veterans heading there because of how old they are. Jill, there's an estimated just over 100,000 Americans of these 16 million who served in the conflict who are still alive. These are numbers as of last year. And we're losing about 130 veterans a day. So it was incredible to see that group make their way. I know American Airlines sponsored that, and they got an incredible welcome in France yesterday. All right, we end here with some music history. On this day, June 4th, 1984, Bruce Springsteen released his 7th studio album. The album, of course, Born in the USA, one of the best-selling albums of all time, gave us, of course, the title track, Born in the USA, and Dancing in the Dark. Jill, that album produced 7 top 10 hits. What's your favorite song or songs from that album?
Moshe, I think it's got to be Glory Days, but not to be too controversial. I happen to not love this album. Like, of all of Bruce Springsteen's albums, this is not my favorite.
Oh.
But I do also appreciate Courtney Cox and her cameo, potentially getting her start in the Dancing in the Dark video.
Yes, there was a time, we'll tell our kids, when people got their start in these things called music videos. And we'd come home from school and wait for them to premiere music videos on MTV. Pre-YouTube, pre-TikTok. Kids, your parents had to develop a lot of patience.
Although the funny thing is, my daughter lives for commercials. I think because she never sees them when a commercial comes on.
I can't wait for that trend story. We'll be doing it on the podcast soon. Like, Alpha generation loves commercials.
She'll be like, oh, I love this commercial. Leave it on. And I'm like, what? The whole point is that you can skip the commercial. But okay.
There you go. Jill, one more musical item before we go. On this day in 2001, 23 years ago today, Avril Lavigne released her debut album, Let Go, which included Complicated and Skater Boy. He was a skater boy. She said, see you later, boy.
And she spelt it with the number 8 because she was that edgy.
Jill, there was a time not so long ago in the late 90s when if you signed a yearbook, you wrote have a great summer with an 8, GR8. Do you remember that?
I don't feel like I ever did that.
That might be that, like, the nuances of our generational, like, we're only a couple years apart, but like for those of us born in 1982, writing great with an 8 was like a thing we did between 1996 and 1998, and you were just too mature for that at that stage.
Yes, anyone who knows me, the epitome of maturity. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
The reviews matter. The reviews matter. The reviews matter. So please do that. And also check out our sister podcast, Mo News, The Interview, for our newest edition on the pandemic, since we were talking about Fauci today, etc. I think you'll learn a lot about the last 4 years and how we should move forward.
All right, everyone. Have a good one.